Hey, it's Leora, the lead grower here at New Leaf Farms. Congrats on your new hydroponic bin. We put this video together to show you how to get one set up and to get growing right away. Here's what you can expect from this video. First thing I'm going to do is go through what's included in the kit and a couple optional tools to make your life a little bit easier if you choose, how to transplant seedlings into your net pots, how to mix a nutrient solution, how and where to set up your bin, how to position your grow lights, and then some tips and tricks for success and some key reminders at the very end. There are two bin sizes available. The one I'm showing you today is the 38-liter bin, which is great for lettuce or herbs like basil. The kit comes with the bin itself with 8 growing slots, 2 24-inch Sunblaster LED lights, water level gauge, the net pots, the neoprene collars, and an instruction guide. The second size is good for bigger plants like tomatoes or peppers, and that's 72 liters, and that comes with the 72-liter bin with 6 growing slots, 2 24-inch Sunblaster LED lights, a water level gauge, 6 net pots, 6 neoprene collars, and an instruction guide as well. You will also need a scale to weigh out your nutrients and the nutrients themselves, which we carry at the farm. And a couple optional things as well is a light timer. If you don't feel like having to turn your lights on and off every day, you can just plug that into the wall and then plug your lights into the timer, and that'll handle that for you. The last thing I'll bring up is if you have access to a small aquarium pump, sometimes I like to use mine just to help me get all of the water out of the bin when I'm doing my water changes. Okay, now onto the fun part. I'm going to show you how to transplant your seedlings into your net pots. So the plugs that we have at the farm here are a little tall, so I like to just expose the little stem there in order to get the neoprene collar around the base of the plant so that it's nice and snug in there. After I do that, I'm just going to make sure it fits really well in there, stands up nice and straight, and then I'm going to take one of my net pots and I'm going to just gently put some pre-moistened media in there. This one is just coconut coir, and I'm going to make sure that there's a hole big enough for the plug. And I find sometimes twisting the neoprene collar to get it into the net pot helps. In this case, it was a little bit of twisting and a little bit of pushing, and that's all there is to it. I'm going to show you how to do the rest of these because sometimes when there is some variation, it's good to just see how I deal with different sizes of plants. Sometimes these are a bit floppy. So these seedlings that we have here, we carry these at the farm all year round if you don't want to germinate anything at home. If you do want to germinate your seedlings at home, we do also have a germination kit available. And so the main thing to look for when you are installing these plants into the neoprene collars is just to make sure that the main growing point is sitting on top and kind of just snug right in the middle of that collar. You want to make sure that it's not going to prevent any of the leaves from growing. In this case, the leaves are growing from the middle of the plant anyways, but you want to make sure that you're not preventing any of those leaves from coming out. And after I get all of these into the collars, then I will put them one by one into our net pots. Both the neoprene collars and the net pots can be used pretty much as many times as you can get use out of them. You can tell that I have used all of these neoprene collars before, and the only thing that happens sometimes is when the plant gets really, really big and that middle stem grows really thick, it kind of just like squishes the inside and makes a bigger hole. But again, at that point, the main reason that I have these neoprene collars is just to support the plant when it's at that first kind of seedling stage. So you can see that plant is a little bit floppy. It will straighten out as soon as it gets under the grow light, so I'm really not that worried about it. But it just provides that little bit of extra support in the very beginning of its life cycle so it doesn't grow wonky or it doesn't grow off to the side. All right, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to mix your nutrient solution. So I have all the nutrients in the measuring cups at the bottom. In the blue measuring cup, I have calcium nitrate. In the purple measuring cup, I have the Master Blend lettuce formula. So that is their own recipe with a bunch of different micronutrients in it. And then finally in the pink measuring cup, I have magnesium sulfate. So the main thing with your nutrients is that you want to keep them separate. So you want to especially keep the calcium nitrate separate to everything else. it just is how the chemicals interact with each other, that if they mix before they are fully dissolved in solution, sometimes they can bind to each other and be less available for the plants as opposed to more available, which is not what we want. So the recipe is just on the side, and that is a general recipe for all of your water volumes. Like I said, there's two different sizes of bin. We have the 38-liter bin and the 72-liter bin. Those are just how much they hold. So I only usually put about 25 liters in the smaller bin and 60 liters in the larger bin, just because there's some holes on the side near the top for, the handles and such. And also you don't want to be soaking your net pots in nutrient solution every time, which I'll get into later. So another comment on the granular fertilizer, we prefer to use all granular fertilizer just because it has a longer shelf life. There's lower risk of the nutrients precipitating out, so that's when you may also have heard it be called nutrient fallout. So the nutrients interact with each other and then they kind of sit at the bottom, again, not available for the plants, which is not good. So we like to use the granular fertilizer. This master blend fertilizer we really like, and we also have that available at the farm for purchase if you would like to just get all of your stuff in one place. When I'm weighing things out, I like to keep everything in their own separate container, but once we get to dissolving the nutrients, you're okay to mix the magnesium sulfate and the lettuce formula. Just 100% making sure that calcium nitrate doesn't interact with anything else. And it doesn't really matter what quantity of water that you put into your containers to dissolve the nutrients. They are really soluble. So I usually just put a little bit in there so I don't have to carry around big amounts of water. But the thing to make sure is that you account for the water that you use to dissolve your nutrients into the whole total of water that you had calculated and weighed your nutrients out with. So everything is set up, the bin is where it's going to live, and the lights are set up, the nutrients are dissolved, and I've already added that pre-measured water to the bin itself, and I've offset the lid, as I was mentioning earlier, just to allow to add the nutrient solution. When you're offsetting the lid, it's just easier instead of taking the whole thing off, because we do have those net pots in there. So that's why I try to make sure that I always have room to offset the lid if there's a wall or something nearby. So in this case, I'm adding just one container of the nutrients at a time, fully dissolved. I'm not really mixing it around in between, not really worried about that because I did leave them for so long to dissolve fully. They're just kind of going to go into that main solution in the rest of the bucket and in the rest of the bin, and just move throughout there. Sometimes I'll give it a mix, but I'm not really that worried about it. Now that you have everything set up and you're ready to watch your plants grow, I just want to go through a couple tips and tricks that I've learned from growing several cycles of plants in these bins. So the first thing is to make sure that you are doing water changes in your bin. So that means you're completely taking all of the water that's left in the bin out and replacing it with new nutrient solution. And Master Blend recommends doing that once every 2 weeks. Depends on how big the plants are, depends on what you're growing in there, but it's always good to start from that baseline 2-week water change interval and then, extend or shorten from there. Whatever water is left in the bin, whatever nutrient solution is left in the bin, I like to water my houseplants with it just so that it's not going down the drain. The other thing is where to keep your water level. So at the very beginning of a plant's life cycle in that bin, it's going to be small and the roots are not going to have extended down into the solution yet, but eventually they will grow past the net pot. Until then, you can make sure that the media in the net pots are moist so the water is touching it. But as soon as those roots grow down into the solution, you want to make sure that you're not soaking those net pots and the media in there all the time. If it touches them and the water is touching the net pots for a couple days before the plants soak up a bunch of water and lower the water level, that's fine, but you don't want them to be soaking because sometimes the stems of the plants that you're growing are a little bit more sensitive to just like having their roots really, really wet, or again, the stem portion really, really wet, and you don't want to have root rot or anything like that happening. And with that, if at any point your nutrient solution is not ready to be changed yet, so let's say you're at 1 week and the roots are not touching the solution at all, you want to make sure that you're topping up just with plain water in between water changes instead of nutrient solution adding on to the existing nutrient solution in there. You want to make sure that you're only adding nutrient solution when there is nothing left in the bin, basically. On the plant health side of things, there's a couple things that you can look out for. So the first thing I talk about is tip burn. Tip burn looks kind of like brown edges on your lettuce or brown edges on some of the leaves of your plants. This is usually an indicator of too many nutrients or too little nutrients, but it is pretty challenging to determine that just by looking at it. So if you are keeping up with the water changes, it shouldn't really be an issue for you, unless, again, like the air is super dry around that bin, or there's other external factors like it's in front of a vent or something like that. Something that may look like mold but isn't mold are really, really tiny root hairs that you can find on usually the parts of the roots that are not submerged in the water, that are kind of just like around the net pot, so around that moist medium, but it's not directly in the water itself. And the way to tell that that is not mold is that there's individual hairs coming off of a main root structure, and they look really cool. I included a couple images so that you can have a frame of reference, but that is not mold. That means that your plants are healthy, they're doing okay. Another question I get a lot is, how long are you supposed to keep the lights on for? There's lots of different resources online that will tell you specific numbers, but I always start with 12 hours on, 12 hours off. If you have a timer, it's really, really easy. If you don't have a timer, you can judge it, kind of based on when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed, or when you get home from work or something like that. But as a baseline, 12 hours on, 12 hours off is a good place to start. And then from there, you can start to push a little bit longer, depending on how your plants are growing. So just a summary of what we've gone through in this course so far. Number 1 is going to be bin placement. So make sure that it is either on a sturdy shelf or in an area in which there's not a whole bunch of drafts. And if there's a bit of water spillage, you can clean it up, no problem. Make sure that your lights are 6 to 12 inches away from the plants. And with those plants, you can either pick up the starter plants from us all year round for local pickup, or if you want to germinate your plants at home, we also carry germination kits. When you're mixing up your fertilizer, which we always have available for purchase at the farm, make sure that they are completely dissolved separately before you're adding them together. And when you're doing your water change, you're filling up your bin, make sure that the water level only touches the net pots for a short amount of time if those roots have extended down into the nutrient solution. And always make sure to top up with plain water between your water changes. Remove as much of the water as possible that's left in your bin when you are doing a water change to make sure you're not adding new nutrient solution to the old nutrient solution. And for your light cycle, it's a really good, easy place to start if you want to just do 12 hours on, 12 hours off. All right, and that is everything. Thank you so much for following along in this video, and hopefully this gives you all of the extra little tips and tricks to make sure that your first cycle growing in your new hydroponic bin goes as smoothly as possible.